Hey guys, Drifter here. With all of the hubbub and backlash about the next Call of Duty being set in the far future, or possibly even being called space warfare, it kind of got me thinking about why does sci-fi matter at all? Why are some people fans of this genre, and why do some people hate it? What is the value of this genre of fiction, and where did it kind of come from? So that's what we're going to talk about today. For perspective, I am a fan of sci-fi. I'm a big sci-fi fan. I think I'm fairly well read in the genre of fantasy and a lot of other different things as well. So the idea here is to explain to those of you that hate the genre why some people do like it, and for those of you that do like it, maybe I'll say something that you had perhaps thought of but not verbalized yet. First fact I want to go over is that, like it or not, sci-fi is really a subgenre of fantasy, or fiction in general, science fiction thus being the thing, but it very closely relates to the fantasy novel. They both often share similar morals, similar scales, similar tropes. For example, both science fiction and fantasy will rely on either super advanced technology or magic, and as the quote, I believe it is from Arthur C. Clarke, hopefully it's not Asimov, is that technology that's significantly advanced is indistinguishable from magic. They both serve as a deus ex machina to kind of advance the plot. You don't have to really explain it and you can move on. They both have different races or aliens, for instance, elves, orcs, demons, wraiths or whatever, versus, say, gray aliens, reptilian aliens, cat aliens, big, small, viruses, whatever that you would see in sci-fi. They often involve either a wise or blessed protagonist. In the fantasy and sci-fi genres, you can have a protagonist that is witty, that is clever, fast on their feet, they're brilliant, either in magic or science, or you can have somebody that's special, that's chosen, that's half alien, half druid, part magic, whatever, and they use these powers to kind of advance through the story. And most of the time, not always, but most of the time, the stakes are very large in these stories. It's humanity itself. It's the entire planet will be ruled by an evil overlord who has orcs or aliens, or the whole universe is at stake, or it's just very, very high stakes in most cases. However, there is a core difference between the two, and I think the core difference is where the value of sci-fi really lies. Fantasy authors invent what does not exist in order to use it to tell a story, and that story can only happen in their fantasy or made-up scenario. The story is most often a moral story about good, wrong, consequences, that kind of thing, sometimes action, of course, or it can be about emotional education, say in Game of Thrones, for example, whereas not all people are predictable, and the complexities of human nature are very, very difficult to understand, and lead to some very interesting results. Sci-fi tends, instead of inventing what does not exist, it tends to extrapolate what already exists into what can happen almost exclusively in the future, and the story, instead of being a moral or ethical story or an emotional educational story, it can be a warning about the future, a warning maybe even about the present, or educational in some way about the decisions that we may be facing in the near future, kind of a different type of educational. And I think that sci-fi is a genre for very forward-thinking and hopeful people, because it almost always centers on a future, and the future, even though, let's say, it's a dark and gloomy future, let's say maybe it's not the best future, our technology, which is something that we put an astonishing amount of faith in the modern world, is almost always advanced in a science fiction novel. So that faith, that belief that awesome technology is going to progress and that our way of life will get better and we'll get smarter and all this sort of stuff is, I think, a trait of very hopeful people. Most of the readers, myself included, actually hold out some hope that the technologies that they're reading about may one day be real, and that may be very far from now. That might be something we'll never see in our lifetime, but it's kind of a window into what's coming, because our technology advances so incredibly fast that we are barely even able to keep up with it. Almost no person on the planet is able to keep up with it completely, and things that are commonplace today would probably seem like magic maybe even 25 years in the past, and that window is getting shorter and shorter. 10 years into the future, some of the things that we do are going to seem like magic today, and that's kind of how this goes. Sci-fi is, perhaps even more importantly, referenced in a prediction of future, more specifically about warnings, about things that we as a society are doing wrong now, or technology that we're progressing improperly now, or some of our behaviors now that will come back to bite us in the butt in the future, such as how do we handle the first alien contact? If we are so blessed to come into contact with aliens in this generation, actual extraterrestrials, how would we handle first contact? And I know that's a very far-fetched thing, and I admit that. Would the United States military bungle something? Would the government misstep? Would they love us? Would they hate us? How different would our cultures be? We would assume that they would want to trade or exchange technologies, but what if they don't care? What if they're so far advanced we're like a zoo to them? Or what if they don't believe in capitalism or mercantilism? Or what if they view us as barbarians? How do we, if they're so advanced beyond us that they can travel through time and space, which you kind of have to beat the speed of light, different story there. Does it even matter? They could just move in and take over the whole planet. There is an infinite number of warnings about a strong AI rebellion. Think the Terminator or iRobot. We finally invent a strong AI, a true, actual intelligence that can be scaled up or down or made vastly more intelligent than a human being, to the point where every idea, you could put 100 people in a room and have them thinking constantly, 100 of the greatest minds on the planet, and the AI could just think circles around them. And setting something like this loose into the free world makes us wonder, what is life? What is safe? How would we handle this? How should we handle this? Should we be afraid of this? Should we not? Compassion, anger, whatever. There's the nanobot swarm or the gray goo scenario, which I think has actually been debunked recently. Transhumanism, which I touched on in a different video. The idea that as we continue into the future, and let's say that by the grace of God, the human race survives another 20,000 years, and our technology continues, will we evolve alongside our technology instead of natural selection? Are we even being naturally selected anymore? Will we change our own biology to become more than humans? And issues with time dilation, which, by the grace of God, if we are fortunate enough to expand into the heavens and explore not only other solar systems, maybe other galaxies, we're going to have to deal with time dilation, how massive the magnitude is between stars, how difficult communication would be, the fact that people are going to be aging at different rates depending on the speed that they're moving and things like this. And these are all questions that are far into the future that we've never even hoped to think about. But when the time comes, when the bridge comes and we get there, the reference that we're going to have, the things that we're going to have to look back on and to wonder, the smart people that we will consult, I think will actually be some of these science fiction books. And again, they probably won't be perfectly accurate, no, by no means actually, but some of the core ideas and human problems will still exist, and the solutions and issues will still be in there. And these are strong and serious explorations of what could happen in our future. It's also interesting that sci-fi authors usually put in a lot of legwork to dream up future technology, some of them even doing calculations or inventing their own technologies and inspiring others, and a great number of the inventions that we have today are heavily inspired by science fiction. Just to name a very few, submarines were inspired by Jules Verne's 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. I know submarines are old technology, but they were very, very new in the 1800s, I promise. Cell phones were largely inspired from Star Trek, along with tablets being from 2001: A Space Odyssey. Can't tell you how many movies had cybernetic limbs or, robotic components added to people to replace ones. And these are not functional yet, but we're moving in the direction and they're progressing very well. I mean, it's a very, very good thing. And finally, sci-fi forces us to realize that our world and our problems are ultimately very small, especially compared to those that future humans will have to face. Right now, our issues are, states' rights, local city elections, how to get more energy, more bang for our buck, economy, war, things like that. But in the future, we're going to have to deal with perfecting our own way of life here on Earth such that it's actually sustainable, because right now it's not. We might have to tackle the possibly impossible task of outward expansion into outer space, how to deal with AI, how to deal with aliens, how to deal with space phenomenon that we've never thought of before, and a lot of very difficult questions that just aren't propping up yet. So it's very forward-looking, people, and I think that a lot of these are the values of sci-fi. Now again, not all of these things are people care about. Some people don't care about technology, some people don't care about inventions, some people are like, you know what, I'm going to be dead and I'm not a scientist and I don't contribute to this stuff, so it doesn't matter and I don't care. And that's totally fine. You don't have to care, but some people like me, we like to think about these things, and some of these are the reasons that we enjoy sci-fi. P.S. At the end of this commentary, I've got some good books for you to read if you're into this sort of stuff. I would recommend The Forever War, very fantastic book about time dilation, about soldiers that are traveling to fight aliens, but it takes like 100 years to get there. So the technology changes every time they fight. There's Neuromancer, which very strongly inspired The Matrix. Fantastic book, even though it's a little bit dated because it was written in the 80s. There's Ringworld by Larry Niven, which talks about a completely sustainable and nearly perfect future environment. A very long, complicated series. Just read the first one. The other ones get too crazy. There's Foundation, which talks about galactic civilizations. And Dune is another fun one to read. Dune's probably the most fun of all of these to read because it very closely aligns with fantasy and it's got a lot of characters you can get into. But guys, that's all for the commentary today. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you learned something useful. If you did, don't forget to like, favorite, and subscribe. Drifter out.